The transport ship landed with a heavy thud on Earth's surface. Jake Morrison stepped out into the sunlight for the first time in 5 years. His uniform was clean but worn, his face tired. The war was over, and somehow humanity had won. The spaceport was crowded with returning soldiers. Families cried and hugged their loved ones. Jake had no one waiting for him. His parents had died while he was fighting on the other side of the galaxy. He picked up his bag and walked toward the processing center. A young officer stopped him at the gate. She looked nervous as she checked her tablet. "Captain Morrison?" she asked. "That's me," Jake said. "Sir, you need to report to Building 7. There's something waiting for you." Jake frowned. "What kind of something?" The officer's face went red. "A war reparation, sir. From the Crithian government." Jake's stomach tightened. He had heard rumors about these gifts the Crithians were sending to human soldiers. He had hoped it was just talk. Building 7 was quiet. Inside, a stern-looking man in a coalition uniform sat behind a desk. Behind him stood a girl. No, not a girl, an alien. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was pale blue with silver markings along her arms. Her eyes were too large and completely black. She wore a simple gray dress and kept her gaze on the floor. "Captain Morrison," the man said without warmth. "I'm Commander Hayes. I'm here to transfer custody of this Velkari female to you. Her designation is Lyria." "Custody?" Jake said. "What are you talking about?" Hayes sighed like he had explained this 100 times already. "The Crithian Empire has provided war prizes to all human officers who served with distinction. This is their custom. She comes with full documentation and a compliance implant. Everything is legal under the treaty terms." Jake stared at the girl. She hadn't moved or looked up. "This is slavery," Jake said flatly. "It's complicated," Hayes replied. "The Velkari were subjects of the Crithian Empire. This is how their culture works. We can't refuse without causing a diplomatic incident." "So send her back," Jake said. Hayes shook his head. "If you refuse, she gets reassigned, probably to a Crithian overseer. Is that what you want?" Jake felt trapped. He looked at Lyria again. She was shaking slightly. "What happens if I take her?" Jake asked. "She's registered to you. You're responsible for her." "That's it." Hayes pushed a tablet across the desk. "Sign here." Jake's hand hovered over the screen. Every part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away. But Hayes was right. If he left her here, things would be worse for her. He signed. Hayes stood up quickly, clearly eager to finish. "She understands basic English. The implant ensures compliance with direct orders. Good luck, Captain." Jake picked up the papers and turned to Lyria. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's go." She followed him without a word. The ride to Jake's apartment was silent. He had rented a small place before the war, and miraculously it was still available. The building was old, but clean. Jake carried his bag up 3 flights of stairs. Lyria walked behind him, her steps soft. Inside, Jake dropped his bag and looked around. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom. He felt exhausted. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Lyria didn't respond. She stood by the door waiting. Jake realized she was waiting for orders. The thought made him sick. "The bedroom is yours," he said, pointing. "I'll sleep on the couch. There's food in the kitchen. Take whatever you want. The bathroom is through there. Use whatever you need." Lyria looked confused. Her black eyes finally met his. "I don't understand," she said softly. Her voice was musical, strange. "What don't you understand?" Jake asked. "Where do you want me to sleep?" "In the bedroom, I told you. But where will you use me?" The question was matter-of-fact, like she was asking about the weather. Jake felt his face go hot with anger. Not at her, but at everything that had led to this moment. "I'm not going to use you," he said firmly. "You're not my property. I don't care what the papers say. Lyria's shaking got worse. I don't understand, she repeated. What is my purpose? Jake sat down heavily on the couch. He needed to figure this out, but his mind was too tired. Your purpose is whatever you want it to be, he said. But right now you should eat something and rest. We'll figure everything else out tomorrow. Lyria stood frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she walked toward the bedroom. She stopped at the door and looked back at him. Why? She asked. Why what? Why are you being kind? What do you want from me? Jake met her eyes. I don't want anything. You didn't ask for this. Neither did I. But I'm not going to treat you like an object. Lyria disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. Jake heard the lock click. He lay back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. 5 years of war, and he thought he had seen everything. But this was different. This was worse in some ways because it was legal, sanctioned, normal to everyone except him. His mind raced with questions. How did you help someone who had been programmed to obey? How did you undo years of conditioning? Could that implant be removed? Jake pulled out his old tablet and started searching. There had to be someone who knew about Crithian technology. There had to be a way to fix this. In the bedroom, Lyria sat on the edge of the bed. She touched the soft blanket with careful fingers. The room was warm. There was a window with curtains, a small lamp on the table. She didn't understand the human. He gave orders, but they made no sense. He offered kindness, but asked for nothing in return. It felt like a trap, but she couldn't see the shape of it yet. Her implant pulsed gently at the base of her skull. It was waiting for clear commands. Without them, it left her in a strange fog of uncertainty. Lyria lay down on the bed, fully clothed. She kept her eyes open, watching the door. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more confusion. She had learned not to hope for anything specific. Hope was dangerous when you had no control over your life, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the implant's influence, a tiny spark of something stirred. Something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. 3 weeks passed in strange silence. Jake went to his debriefing sessions at the military base. Lyria stayed in the apartment, moving like a ghost from room to room. She cooked meals without being asked. She cleaned things that were already clean. She waited. Jake tried to talk to her, but conversations died quickly. She answered his questions with short responses. Yes, no, if you wish. Her compliance implant kept her locked in a pattern of servitude. At night, Jake researched. He read everything he could find about the Velkari, about Crithian control technology, about the other soldiers dealing with the same situation. Most had simply accepted their gifts and moved on. Some treated the aliens like servants. A few had already sent them away to work camps. Jake refused to accept any of it. He finally found a name. Ben Carter, an engineer who had worked on alien technology during the war. Ben had left the military and now worked with the Coalition Medical Corps. His file mentioned experience with neural implants. Jake called him. Captain Morrison? Ben's voice was cautious. How did you get this number? I pulled some favors, Jake admitted. I need your help. I have a Velkari girl with a Crithian compliance implant. Can it be removed? There was a long pause. Theoretically, yes. But it's dangerous. The implant connects directly to the brainstem. One wrong move and she could die or end up brain damaged. What if we don't remove it? Jake asked. Then she stays a slave for the rest of her life, Ben said simply. Look, I've been researching this too. I think I can do it, but I need to see her first. Can you bring her to the medical facility tomorrow? Jake agreed and ended the call. He found Lyria in the kitchen, washing dishes that were already clean. Lyria, he said gently, we're going somewhere tomorrow, to see a doctor. She turned, her dark eyes unreadable. Am I broken? The question hurt. No, you're not broken. But that thing in your head, the implant, it can be removed, if you want. Why would I want that? She asked. Jake stepped closer. Because it controls you. It takes away your choices. Don't you want to decide things for yourself? Lyria's hands tightened on the dish. I don't understand what that means. I've had the implant since I was a child. I don't remember being different. Then let me help you remember, Jake said. The medical facility was in the old part of the city. Ben Carter met them at the door. He was younger than Jake expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes and steady hands. This is Lyria, Jake said. Ben nodded to her politely. Hello, Lyria. I'm going to scan your implant, okay? It won't hurt. Lyria looked at Jake. He realized she was asking for permission. It's okay, he said. You can trust him. The scan took an hour. Ben worked quietly, occasionally making notes. Lyria sat perfectly still the entire time. Finally, Ben turned off the machine. It's worse than I thought. The implant has been active for at least 15 years. It's deeply integrated with her neural pathways. Removing it will be like untangling roots from a tree. Can you do it? Jake asked. Yes, but she'll need time to recover. Weeks, maybe months. And there will be pain. A lot of it. Ben looked at Lyria. Do you understand? This will hurt, but afterward you'll be free. Lyria's voice was small. What is free? Jake knelt beside her chair. Free means you can choose. You can say no. You can decide what you want to do, where you want to go. You won't have to wait for orders anymore. And if I choose wrong, she asked, then you learn and choose differently next time. That's what being alive means. Lyria was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once. I want to try. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Ben needed time to prepare and study the scans more carefully. Jake took Lyria home and tried to explain what would happen. It will take about 6 hours, he said. You'll be asleep. When you wake up, the implant will be gone. Will I still be me? She asked. Jake didn't have an answer for that. The night before the surgery, Jake couldn't sleep. He made coffee and sat in the living room, staring at nothing. The bedroom door opened. Lyria came out wearing the same gray dress she arrived in. Can I sit? She asked. Of course. You don't have to ask. She sat on the other end of the couch. They were quiet for a while. Tell me about humans, she said suddenly. Jake looked at her, surprised. What do you want to know? Your people fight wars, you kill, but you also do this. Help people you don't know. I don't understand it. Jake thought about how to answer. We're complicated. We've done terrible things in our history. We've hurt each other, enslaved each other. But we learned. Slowly. We decided that freedom and dignity matter more than power. We're not perfect, but we try to be better. The Velkari were like that once, Lyria said quietly. Before the Krithians came, my grandmother told me stories before she died. We had cities, ships, art, and music. Then the Krithians conquered us and we forgot everything. You'll remember again, Jake promised. After tomorrow, you can start remembering. The surgery went longer than expected. Jake sat in the waiting room for 9 hours, drinking bad coffee and pacing. Finally, Ben came out. His face was exhausted but satisfied. She's alive. The implant is out. But, Captain, she's going to need a lot of support. The pain will be intense for at least a week. And mentally, she's going to be dealing with feelings she's never experienced before. Jake was allowed to see her an hour later. Lyria lay in the medical bed, her face pale. Bandages covered the back of her neck. Her eyes were closed. Lyria, Jake said softly. Her eyes opened slowly. For the first time, he saw real emotion in them. Fear, confusion, pain. It hurts, she whispered. I know. But you're free now. A tear ran down her cheek. Jake had never seen her cry before. "I'm scared," she said. "That's okay. Being scared is normal. You're allowed to feel it." Over the next days, Jake watched Lyria discover emotions like a child learning to walk. She cried over small things. She laughed at a joke on the television and then looked shocked at her own laughter. She got angry when the coffee maker broke and then apologized over and over. "Stop apologizing," Jake said gently. "You're allowed to be angry." "But I was trained never to show anger," she said. "You weren't trained. You were programmed. There's a difference. Now you get to choose how you feel and how you express it." One night, 2 weeks after the surgery, Lyria came into the living room where Jake was reading. She looked different, stronger somehow. "I want to thank you," she said, "but I'm also angry at you." Jake set down his book. "Why angry?" "Because now I know what I lost all those years. I'll never get them back, and you made me see that." Her voice cracked. "Sometimes I wish I didn't know." Jake nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry. But would you really want to go back?" Lyria thought about it. Finally, she shook her head. "No. Even though it hurts, I don't want to go back." "That's brave," Jake said. "I don't feel brave. I feel lost." "Then we'll find your way together, one day at a time." Lyria sat down beside him. For the first time, she chose to be close to another person. Not because she was ordered to, but because she wanted to. It was a beginning. 6 weeks after the surgery, Lyria started asking questions about her people. Where were the other Velkari? Were they all given to human soldiers? Could they be helped too? Jake used his military access to search the databases. What he found troubled him. Over 3,000 Velkari had been distributed across the coalition. Most were listed as domestic workers or personal servants. The records were vague and incomplete. "Something feels wrong about this," Jake told Ben during one of Lyria's checkup appointments. "Why would the Crithians give away so many of their servants?" Ben frowned at his scanner. "Maybe they're trying to build goodwill, show they're following the treaty terms." "Or maybe there's another reason," Jake said. That night, Jake examined the data Ben had extracted from Lyria's removed implant. He wasn't a tech expert, but he knew enough to spot patterns. The implant hadn't just controlled Lyria. It had recorded things, conversations, locations, data about Jake's apartment, his habits, his security codes. His blood went cold. "Lyria," he called. She came in from the kitchen where she had been experimenting with cooking. It was something she enjoyed, now that she could choose to do it. "What's wrong?" she asked, reading his expression. "Your implant was recording information about me, about everything around you." He pulled up the data on his screen. "Do you know if the other Velkari implants do the same thing?" Lyria's face went pale. "Yes, all implants record. The data is sent back to Crithian servers every night during sleep cycles. It's how they track their servants." "But you're not their servant anymore. The war is over. Why would they still need this information?" Lyria sat down slowly. "Unless the war isn't really over." Jake spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. He contacted other soldiers who had received Velkari. Most didn't want to talk about it. But a few agreed to let Ben scan their servants' implants. Every single one was recording data. The Crithians had turned thousands of slaves into unwitting spies. Jake knew he needed to bring this to someone with authority. He requested a meeting with Admiral Lisa Brennan, head of Coalition Security. Her office was intimidating, filled with awards and battle honors. "Captain Morrison," she said without looking up from her desk, "you're supposed to be on leave. What's so urgent?" Jake laid out everything: the implants, the data collection, his theory about the Crithian intelligence network. Brennan finally looked at him. "This is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" Jake handed her a drive. Data from 5 different implants, all recording. All transmitting to Crithian servers that are supposed to be shut down. Brennan plugged in the drive and read through it. Her expression darkened. If this is real, we have a major security breach, she said. I'll assign a team to investigate. But Morrison, this needs to stay quiet. If the Crithians know we're onto them, they could activate contingency plans. What kind of contingency plans? Jake asked. That's what I'm going to find out. Back at the apartment, Jake found Lyria teaching another Velkari girl how to cook pasta. The girl's name was Zara, and she belonged to one of Jake's former squad members. Her implant had been removed 2 days ago. She's still learning to make choices, Lyria explained. Small things help, like choosing what food to make. Zara looked up nervously. Is this okay? Am I doing this right? There's no right or wrong, Lyria said gently. It's just pasta. If you don't like it, you make it different next time. Jake watched them and felt something shift in his chest. Lyria wasn't just recovering. She was finding purpose in helping others. Over the next weeks, more freed Velkari came to the apartment. Lyria talked to them in their own language, which she was slowly remembering. She explained freedom. She held them when they cried. She answered questions Jake couldn't. You're good at this, Jake told her one evening after everyone had left. I remember things now, Lyria said. Before the implant, before the Crithians. My mother was a healer. She helped people. Maybe I'm like her. You definitely are. The investigation moved quickly. Admiral Brennan discovered that the Crithian Provisional Government had been infiltrated by hardliners who wanted to restart the war. They had distributed the Velkari specifically to spy on human military personnel. But there was more. The implants could be triggered remotely. Every Velkari with an active implant could be turned into an assassin with a single broadcast signal. Brennan called Jake to her office urgently. We need to remove all the implants immediately, she said, but we only have 3 doctors trained to do the procedure. Ben Carter and 2 others. There are over 3,000 Velkari. We don't have time. Then we need more doctors, Jake said. We don't have anyone else with the right skills. What about the Velkari themselves? Jake asked. Lyria told me her people used to have advanced biotechnology. Some of them might remember. Brennan considered this. It's worth trying. Can you ask her? Jake brought Lyria to the Coalition Medical Center. She had never been in such a large military facility before. Soldiers stared at her as she passed. Lyria, we need help, Jake explained the situation. Do you know any Velkari who might have medical knowledge? Lyria thought carefully. There's an elder named Kira. She was given to a general. She's old enough to remember before the conquest. But I don't know if she'll help. She's been a slave for 40 years. Her implant is very old. Can you talk to her? Jake asked. They found Kira 3 days later. She was thin and bent, her silver markings faded. She lived in the basement of a military housing complex, sleeping on a mat. When she saw Lyria, her dark eyes widened. You have no implant, Kira said in their language. It was removed, Lyria replied. I'm free now. Kira touched the back of Lyria's neck gently. I forgot what freedom looked like. Lyria explained what they needed. Kira listened without speaking. Finally, she nodded. I was a surgeon once, a lifetime ago, but I remember. If you free me, I will help free others. Ben removed Kira's implant the next day. The old woman suffered through the pain without complaint. When it was over, she wept for an hour. Then she got to work. Kira taught Ben and the other doctors faster techniques. She remembered things from Velkari medical science that made the procedure safer. Within weeks, they had trained 20 more surgeons. The removal program accelerated, but they were racing against time. Intelligence reports showed increased Crithian activity, secret communications, movement of ships. Something was coming. Lyria worked alongside Kira, helping to coordinate the freed Velkari. She created a network, a way for her people to communicate and support each other. Jake watched her transform from a scared girl into a leader. One night, as they reviewed lists of Velkari still waiting for surgery, Lyria stopped. "There are others," she said quietly. "Other Velkari?" Jake asked. "Other species. The Crithians enslaved many races. If they did this to us, they probably did it to others." Jake felt the weight of it. This wasn't just about the Velkari. This was bigger than any of them had imagined. "One problem at a time," he said. "First we save your people, then we figure out the rest." Lyria nodded, but her expression was troubled. "Jake, I'm scared of what's coming. The Crithians won't let this happen without a fight." "I know," Jake said, "but we're not alone anymore. You have your people. I have mine. We'll face it together." Outside the window, the city lights gleamed in the darkness. Somewhere out there, thousands of Velkari were waiting for freedom, waiting for hope. And somewhere else, in the cold space between stars, Crithian ships were moving. The storm was coming. The alert came at 3 in the morning. Jake's communication device screamed him awake. Admiral Brennan's voice was sharp and urgent. "Morrison, get to the command center now. We have a situation." Jake was dressed in 2 minutes. Lyria appeared in her doorway, already awake. "What's happening?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Stay here. Lock the doors." "No," she said firmly. "If this is about my people, I'm coming with you." Jake didn't have time to argue. They ran to his car and sped through empty streets. The command center was blazing with lights. Soldiers rushed everywhere. The main display screen showed a map covered in red markers. Brennan saw Jake and waved him over. "It's happening! The Crithians just tried to activate all the implants simultaneously. They attempted to turn every unreleased Velkari into an assassin." "Did it work?" Jake asked, his stomach dropping. "Mostly no. We've removed over 2,000 implants already, but there are still about 800 active ones. Some of those Velkari are already following their programming. We have reports of attacks on coalition leaders across 5 planets." Lyria stepped forward. "Are my people dying?" Brennan looked at her with something like respect. "Some are. The Crithians programmed them to complete their missions or die trying, but many are fighting the programming. It's not perfect control." "Because they know they have another option now," Lyria said. "They know freedom is possible." The next hours were chaos. Reports flooded in from everywhere. A Velkari servant had attacked a senator on Mars but stopped herself at the last moment. Another had successfully protected his human family from Crithian agents. 3 had died completing their programmed missions before anyone could stop them. Jake coordinated with military units trying to secure the remaining Velkari without hurting them. Lyria worked with Kira to contact every freed Velkari they could reach, creating a communication network to warn and protect those still trapped. Then the second wave hit. Crithian ships appeared at the edge of Earth's system. Not a full invasion force, but enough to cause serious damage. The coalition fleet scrambled to intercept them. "They're not trying to conquer," Brennan said, studying the tactical display. "They're trying to cause confusion. This is a coup attempt. The Crithian hardliners are making their move against their own provisional government." "Can we stop them?" Jake asked. "Not quickly enough. They have agents on the ground. If they reach coalition headquarters and kill the right people, they could collapse the peace treaty." Jake's device pinged. A message from Ben. The medical center was under attack. "I have to go," Jake said. "Take security with you," Brennan ordered. "No time!" Jake ran for the exit. Lyria followed him. The medical center was in flames when they arrived. Smoke poured from broken windows. Gunfire echoed from inside. Jake pulled his sidearm and moved toward the entrance. "Stay behind me," he told Lyria. "I don't think so," she said. Her voice had changed, harder, colder. They found Ben in the surgery wing, defending 3 Velkari patients who were still recovering from their procedures. 2 Krithian soldiers in armor were advancing on him. Ben had a medical laser he was using like a weapon, but it was barely slowing them down. Jake fired, hitting one soldier in the shoulder. The Krithian turned, raising his weapon. Lyria moved faster than Jake thought possible. She grabbed a metal tray from a nearby table and threw it like a disc. It hit the Krithian's helmet with devastating force, cracking the visor. Before the soldier could recover, Lyria had crossed the distance and struck him twice in rapid succession. The Krithian fell. The second soldier aimed at Lyria. Jake fired again, hitting the soldier's weapon arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Lyria picked it up smoothly, checked it, and pointed it at the soldier with perfect form. "Don't move," she said in the Krithian language. The soldier stared at her in shock. "You're Velkari. You can't fight. You were made docile." "You made us forget," Lyria said coldly. "But we're remembering." More Krithian soldiers burst into the wing. Jake and Lyria took cover behind the surgical equipment. Ben pulled the recovering patients into a side room. "I don't suppose you know how to shoot that thing?" Jake asked Lyria as bullets sparked around them. "Apparently I do," she said, sounding surprised at herself. She leaned out and fired 3 precise shots. 2 soldiers went down. "Where did you learn that?" Jake shouted over the noise. "I don't know. My body just knows." She fired again. "It's like the memories are waking up." They held the position for 10 minutes before coalition security forces arrived. The remaining Krithian soldiers retreated and the building was secured. Ben emerged from the side room, shaking but alive. "That was too close." Lyria lowered the weapon, staring at her hands. "I killed someone." "You saved us," Ben said. "I still killed someone." She looked at Jake. "I didn't think I could. I didn't know I remembered how." Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you had to do. I'm sorry you had to remember that way." The fighting continued for 3 more days. Krithian agents struck at coalition facilities across multiple planets. But they had underestimated 2 things. First, they had underestimated how many Velkari had already been freed. Those freed slaves warned their human families, saved lives, and turned against their former masters. Second, they had underestimated the Velkari themselves. Once the implants were gone or damaged by the failed mass activation, memories started returning. Memories of being warriors, scientists, engineers. The Velkari weren't just victims anymore. Kira led a group of elderly Velkari who remembered the most. They provided intelligence about Krithian tactics and technology. They identified key targets and weak points. Lyria found herself leading younger freed Velkari in defense operations. She didn't want to be a fighter, but her people needed someone who understood both the old ways and the new freedom. On the 4th day, Jake returned home to find Lyria sitting in the dark, still in her torn and blood-stained clothes. "It's over," he said quietly. "The Krithian coup failed. Their hardliner faction has been arrested. The coalition is stable." "How many died?" she asked. "Too many. 47 humans, 61 Velkari who couldn't break their programming, another 100 wounded." Lyria's hands were shaking. "I keep seeing their faces, the ones I shot." Jake sat beside her. "I know. It doesn't get easier, but you saved more lives than you took. Does that make it right?" "No, but it makes it necessary." He was quiet for a moment. "Lyria, you don't have to fight anymore. The danger is past. But there are still hundreds of Velkari with implants, and you said there might be other enslaved species too." She looked at him with haunted eyes. "How can I stop now?" "You can't save everyone," Jake said gently. "But I have to try. My mother was a healer. I want to be like her. But maybe healing means fighting sometimes too." They sat in silence as the sun rose outside the window. The city was scarred but standing. Somewhere out there, the last implants were being removed. The last slaves were tasting freedom for the first time. It wasn't over. Jake knew that. The Crithians would regroup eventually. There would be more conflicts, more challenges, but for now, there was this moment. Two people from different worlds, changed by war and freed by choice, watching the dawn together. Lyria leaned against Jake's shoulder, exhausted. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as a person, before I could see myself that way." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with her while the morning light grew stronger and the world slowly began to heal. 6 months had passed since the Crithian coup attempt. The coalition headquarters had been rebuilt stronger than before. In one of the newer buildings, a meeting room filled with representatives from a dozen species. At the center table sat Lyria. She wore simple clothes, nothing fancy, but she carried herself with quiet authority. Around her sat 5 other Velkhari, including old Kira. They had become the founding members of the Velkhari Restoration Council. "The last implant was removed 3 days ago," Lyria reported to the assembly. "All 3,247 Velkhari in coalition space are now free." There was scattered applause. A human diplomat stood up. "This is a remarkable achievement, but we must discuss the cost. The removal program has used significant resources, medical facilities, personnel, funding. Some member species are questioning whether this was the best use of coalition assets." Lyria met his eyes calmly. "You're asking if freedom was worth the expense." The diplomat shifted uncomfortably. "I'm asking if we can sustain this level of intervention in cultural matters." Before Lyria could respond, Admiral Brennan stood. She had become a strong supporter of the liberation program. With respect, this isn't a cultural matter. Slavery is slavery, regardless of what culture practices it. If the coalition stands for anything, it stands for the dignity of all sentient beings. That's not optional. Another delegate, a reptilian species called the Saurics, spoke up. "But where does it end? Do we now police every species' internal affairs? Do we dictate morality to the entire galaxy?" Jake entered the room at that moment, followed by 3 other human soldiers and 2 freed Velkhari. He had been promoted to major and given command of a new coalition task force. He waited for a pause in the argument before speaking. "We're not dictating anything. We're responding to evidence of active harm. And we've discovered that harm extends far beyond the Velkhari." He activated a holographic display. "This is data recovered from Crithian servers. 17 other species are currently enslaved within former Crithian territory. Some have been enslaved for over a century." The room fell silent. "We've also found evidence of similar practices among 3 other coalition member species," Jake continued. "The issue is bigger than we thought. We can choose to ignore it and maintain political stability, or we can do something about it." The debate continued for hours. Some species threatened to leave the coalition if humans pushed too hard on the slavery issue. Others supported the initiative but wanted it handled slowly, carefully. Finally, a vote was called. The measure passed by a narrow margin. The coalition would establish a task force to identify and eliminate forced servitude wherever it was found. Jake would lead it. After the meeting, Lyria found Jake in the hallway. "You made enemies today," she said. "I know, but it was necessary." He smiled tiredly. "How are you holding up?" "Overwhelmed. I never wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a healer like my mother." "You are a healer. You're just healing entire populations instead of individuals." Lyria laughed softly. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost manageable." They walked together through the new headquarters building. Other Velkhari passed them, going about various tasks. Some worked as translators, others as technical specialists. A few had joined the military. They were building new lives, finding new purposes. "I got a message from the reclaimed colony world," Lyria said. They want me to come speak at the founding ceremony next month. Are you going? I think I have to. My people need to see that we have a future, not just a past. The colony world had been a Velkari settlement before the Crethean conquest. It had been abandoned for decades, but now freed Velkari were returning to rebuild it. It was symbolic, a way of reclaiming their history. Jake's communication device buzzed. He checked it and frowned. "What is it?" Lyria asked. "Intelligence report. We've located a slave market in the Outer Rim, multiple species. The local government claims it's legal under their laws." "What will you do?" "My team leaves tomorrow. We'll gather evidence and present it to the coalition. If they won't help, we'll find another way." Lyria touched his arm. "Be careful. Not everyone wants the galaxy to change. I know. But I have good teachers." He smiled at her. "Someone taught me that freedom is worth fighting for." The next weeks were busy for both of them. Jake and his team traveled to distant systems, documenting slavery and building cases. Some missions went smoothly. Others turned violent. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Lyria traveled to the colony world with Kira and the other council members. Thousands of Velkari had gathered there, building homes and farms, planting crops in soil their ancestors had once worked. The ceremony was held at sunset. Lyria stood before her people, looking out at faces that showed hope and determination. "We were broken," she said in their language. "We were told we were nothing, servants, property, less than living beings." The crowd was silent. "But we survived, and now we are remembering who we were. We are Velkari. We were explorers once. Scientists, artists, warriors. We built ships that touched the stars. We had music and poetry and dreams." Her voice grew stronger. "The Cretheans took that from us. But they couldn't destroy it completely. It lived in the stories our elders whispered, in the songs we hummed when we thought no one could hear, in the defiance we showed even when it meant punishment." Lyria raised a flag, designed by freed Velkari artists. It showed a silver tree on a blue background, its roots deep and branches reaching upward. "This is our new beginning, not a return to what we were, but a step toward what we can become. We owe our freedom to many people, to humans who refused to accept slavery, to each other for surviving when survival seemed impossible, but most of all, we owe it to ourselves. We chose to be free. We chose to remember. We chose to live." The crowd erupted in cheers. The flag was raised, fluttering in the evening breeze. That night, as Lyria sat by a fire with Kira and the others, she felt something she had never experienced before: peace. Not happiness exactly, because there was still too much work to do, too many scars that needed healing, but peace, a sense of rightness. "Your mother would be proud," Kira said softly. "You knew her." "A little. Before the conquest, she was brave and kind. Like you." Lyria looked at the stars above. Somewhere out there, Jake was fighting for other enslaved people. Somewhere, the galaxy was slowly, painfully changing. 2 months later, Jake's task force completed its 10th successful mission. They had freed over 500 slaves of various species and arrested 24 slave traders. The work was taking a toll on everyone, but they kept going. Jake stood in front of the coalition assembly again, presenting evidence of slavery among the Goric species. "This has to stop," he said firmly. "We can't call ourselves civilized while we allow this to continue." The vote was closer this time, but it passed. Sanctions were imposed. The Goric's government protested, but eventually agreed to reforms. After the session, several human soldiers approached Jake. They wanted to join his task force. So did 3 Velkari, 2 Saurics, and a member of a species called the Teln. The movement was growing. 1 year after the war ended, Jake and Lyria met at the apartment where it had all started. It felt smaller now, filled with memories of that confused, painful beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked. "The implant removal? All the pain that came after?" Lyria thought about it carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret the years I lost. But no, I don't regret being free. Even on the hardest days when I'm exhausted and scared and not sure I can keep going, I don't regret it." "Good. Because you've changed the galaxy, Lyria. Your people have a future now." "We have a start," she corrected. "The real work is just beginning. But I think we can do it. Humans and Velkari together. Maybe others too, eventually." Jake raised his glass of water. "To new beginnings. And to stubborn humans who refuse to accept the status quo," Lyria added with a smile. They sat together as the sun set over the city, two people from different worlds who had found purpose in each other's struggle. The galaxy was vast and often cruel. Slavery still existed in dark corners, injustice still thrived. But change had begun. The idea of universal dignity had been planted, and ideas, once planted, were hard to kill. Somewhere, slaves were dreaming of freedom. Somewhere, people were choosing compassion over convenience. Somewhere, the future was being built by those brave enough to believe it was possible. Jake and Lyria would be part of that future, not as master and servant, not as savior and victim, but as equals, as friends, as two beings who had learned that freedom meant nothing if it wasn't shared. The stars came out one by one, filling the sky with light, and in that light, possibilities were endless.